Hello and welcome to Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, and I'm happy to join you on a Saturday, August 26th. We're creeping up on 1 o'clock. I have joining me today from all the way from Sweden, a young man named Fabian Delryd, I think his last name is. And he is a 7'7" and 3/4 inch high jumper. That's 2 meters 33. For those of you that think in metric, which I'm such an old dinosaur, I still can't think in metric at all. I have memorized some of them by now, but definitely not all of them. I can give you an estimate when it comes to high jump heights. Other than that, I'm completely lost. As soon as you get into long and triple jump in metric or pole vault, I got no clue. So, but Fabian is getting ready to join us here. I see his name just popped up on the screen, which means he's in the waiting room. And we're getting close to rolling, looks like. So there he is.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going, Fabian?
Yeah, hi. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So
Yeah.
I just gave everybody the send up on you. I told them you're from Sweden and that you are a young power jumping high jumper of 7'7" and 3/4 inches, which is 233. And then I was telling
Yeah,
how terrible I am at metric. So,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so
I think that's a pretty good description.
yeah.
I'm definitely a power jumper.
Oh, yeah, easy to see. I'm going through a single arm phase over here, coaching high
Uh,
jump. I was a power jumper back in my day. I won't tell you how old I am, but I jumped at UCLA here in the States I graduated in '86. So that'll give you a little bit of an idea. And I jumped 222 way back then. And, typical, I did the same thing you do. I don't cross my arms, but I would gather and, boom, take it
yeah.
up. And I was never fast. So the only way that I got off the ground was, with big knee drive and all that. So I can
Were you
see
also dragging your toe like a typical power jumper?
what was that?
Were you also like dragging your toe
I did not
like
drop
in
my
this?
toe. Yeah, I was interested to see that the other day when I did your post. You sent me your videos, and I did the analysis post. The only thing I was thinking was we need to get some bigger shots of you because when I saw it on Instagram, I'm like, man, it's really tiny. One of the things I'm always
Yeah,
complaining about here in the U.S. is about the state of track and field, in the world. And we don't see track and field over here. You have to really go out of your way. Like right now, we're right in the middle of world championships, right? And everybody's like,
yeah.
there's nothing on over here. Like if I wanted to watch it on TV, I got to really go dig for it, and find a special way to cover
Really,
for
really.
it. And it's not that popular over here. It's mentioned like if I look at my ESPN
Mm.
sports app, I mean golf is more popular. Football, basketball, everything over here is way above that. So we don't see it that much. And even when they do, me being a high jumper, I've watched
Yeah,
gosh, I broke down the women's, final from 2021 and I hate everything about the coverage. The angles are all bad. There's
yeah.
no angles that are any good for me to analyze. Like I can see stuff, but it's never exactly where I want it. Some weird behind
No.
bar shots and I'm just like, the people that are doing it obviously don't know anything about the high jump. So it's pretty
I
bad.
guess, yeah, I've definitely noticed that as well. Like they're trying to experiment with all these different angles, making you miss like the jump itself.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's interesting what you say about the World Championships and track overall not being that big of a thing, like not being covered that much. Because I mean, here in Sweden, it's definitely something a lot of people follow. Like, and
Right.
it's on one of the biggest TV channels every night, every single morning session and every single
Right.
afternoon session. So
Oh, that
yeah,
that would
it's
be
pretty
great.
interesting.
We always heard that, when I was
Yeah,
a
and I would say
kid too.
most of the best. Sorry, what?
No, go ahead.
I would say like from what I've gathered, like the US seems to be even more focused on the track events rather than the field events compared to maybe Sweden and Europe,
Yeah. Um,
at least when it comes to media coverage and that.
yeah, it's just really shoddy over here, to be quite honest. Every 4 years we get a shot in the arm with the Olympics because they will do a pretty good job of covering it at the Olympics. But it's nothing like, when I was a kid, I don't know. It just seemed bigger. When I was 12 years old, I saw Bruce Jenner. You might know that name. He won the
Yeah,
decathlon. He won the decathlon back in '76 in
yeah,
Montreal. And he's a big buff
yeah.
guy, and he was on all the cereal boxes over here. He was selling
I've
Wheaties and
heard
stuff
about
like
that.
that. And yeah, it was a big deal, and so I would say since then, the Americans used to dominate the decathlon, and that's not the case so much anymore. That has kind of gone by. We were always good at sprints. We had a few jumpers here and there, Dwight Stones in the high jump, and back in his day, but he never
Yeah,
won it. So the last Olympic gold medalist was Charles Austin in '96, and he set the Olympic record itself at what 7:10 and a half.
right.
But it's been pretty rare, and like you said, we probably have more success in the sprints, but it's just not
Yeah,
that big over here. It really isn't. When we were in college, I kept hearing we should go to Europe. Everybody's going to go to Europe. They love track in Europe.
yeah, that's true. I mean, look at Mondo. Like, he's huge over here in Sweden. And
Mm-hmm.
I bet in you, if he had stayed competing for the US, he would have flown more under the radar.
Right. Right.
Uh, but yeah, so he's like a huge celebrity. But yeah, I mean, but it's interesting because like even though uh, you might not like the US just by its sheer population and like talent pool, you still manage to pump out good jumpers year after
Yeah.
year, like
Yeah.
just out of having a large talent pool, I would say.
Yeah, we've been talking about that for a long time here too. On Raised Bar, we talked about the fact that most of the good jumpers are probably doing other sports. They're playing volleyball,
Yeah,
they're playing basketball for sure. There's a lot of guys that can jump out of the building that are playing pro basketball over here.
yeah.
They can make millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, if I was born in the US, being 6'9", I probably wouldn't have selected doing track and field. Like, I'm pretty sure people would have been trying hard to scout me for basketball instead.
Sure. Oh yeah, yeah. They would have got you early. Like, hey, look at this kid. He's
Yeah. I was
six
six
nine.
seven at 15, so
Yeah.
yeah,
I thought you were tall. My
so,
my one of my jumpers, Barbara Bachaka from Canada, she and I were talking about you the other day. I go, yeah, I got this guy Fabian from Sweden. He says he'll do the podcast. I always get excited to talk to somebody who jumped really high, and she was like, she goes, yeah, what's the deal with him? I think he's really tall, and she's like, I don't know, he doesn't look that tall. I go, look, these heights that he's talking about are pretty high, and I go, they look small. I mean, you're jumping at stuff.
yeah,
You're at six
it's
nine, and
very
you're taking
true.
off. I'm like, it doesn't look that high because you're so tall, right?
Yeah, it's so funny because like often when I'll post something, let's say I post like a 6'7" scissor or something,
Mm-hmm.
there will often be someone in the comments saying like, yeah, there's no way that it's that high unless it's like 6'6". Well, I'm 6'9", so it's definitely that high. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what you mentioned there was interesting too, because I see when you were talking about dragging your foot on the ground and everything, that is one of the things that Barb and I have been talking about because she's a power jumper, right? She's Canadian. She had jumped 182 or something before she came to me, and then we got her over 187 or something like that. I can't remember, something like that. And maybe she had jumped 184, but she improved, and she's just classic power, double arm, big knee drive, and all that. And I was like, I keep working with her on her cycling. So we're talking about, getting your knees up, getting your feet to kick you in the butt when you're running, right? So what I call a high center of mass, right? As you're running. Now your center of mass is high anyway, because you're 6'9", but imagine if you were shuffling your feet the whole way, right? Even at 6'9", you'd be lower to the ground. So I always preach to my athletes, no matter what age, whatever they are, tall or short, I'm like, hey, get your knees and your feet up. I want your center of gravity up before we even take off. But after that, the differences in takeoff styles are huge between double numbers that are all the way back, like you are. There's some of the people with the whip back, I call it the whip back double arm, when they wing that inside arm back, a step before, and then it tends to creep on them, but they go here. And then you've got the ones that whipped back, like Derek Drown does a classic gather, but then he would let that arm go.
Yeah, then it does a single at the end.
Yeah, and he turned into a single. I'm like, what does he bother to gather? He's not going to double. He's going single. So it's like,
Yeah, no,
the
that's
different
interesting.
styles. Speed. I keep preaching to my single armers. I'm like, I have yet to see a single arm power jumper. That it just doesn't really go together for me. It's like you're
it doesn't
moving
make
so
sense
fast
because, well, what I think of that is like from a biomechanical point of view, like
Mm-hmm.
just purely based on physics, you would think that using both arms to gather power would allow you to like exert more force into your legs and jump higher.
Sure.
But the problem when you're a speed jumper and you have like a super fast ground contact time, you're simply not going to have time to cross your chest, go all the
Right.
way back, and do an efficient double arm swing. So that's why, like for a speed jumper, it might not always be like yeah a good tactic. But
Right.
if you're a power jumper and you're spending a lot of time on the ground, it makes sense that you would use a double arm
Right.
swing because you do have time for it and you benefit from it.
Sure. Sure. And then, looking at it from a pure center of mass standpoint, right? If you get both of your arms, like I'm always counseling whenever I show somebody a gather, because over here it's not automatic, right? When I get a brand new jumper, let's say, and I just let them run at the bar and see if they can get off the ground, right? And sometimes they don't have any idea how to use their arms, so they just come up and they go, and you're like, okay. And eventually I'll go, okay, I'm just going to have to teach you something because you're not a natural. Some people will come up and if they played basketball or volleyball, they might get both arms together and start to jump with them. And then some of them that are faster, they might actually go single naturally. I've had all of those situations happen. But when I teach someone to gather, sometimes I almost always show a gather right about here. And I saw yours comes across. And I'm like, I don't care about that, but I definitely don't want it to get too high. Like I've had some people run up and
Yeah,
put their arms over their head. And I'm like, look, you're wasting your time there. I go gather small and then reach back and finish big. I'd rather get your arms up at the finish, not, pre-flight or in the gather
yeah.
itself.
For sure, drawbacks to having like a large gather because you kind of risk losing your rhythm those last two steps. Like you
Your
kind of
speed. Yeah, sure.
it's some weird yeah. But yeah, I wish I would have sent you some clips of me when I was younger because up until I was yeah 16 turning 17, I actually used a single arm and I
Really?
my swing leg was like way closer to my butt. Like I was more of a speed jumper.
Right.
And then when I was like 17, I decided like really drill the double arm swing and then got that down. And
No,
then like a year after that, started dragging my toe. So like I
yeah.
started out as a speed jumper going to a power jumper, which
Yeah.
I guess might be a bit
It's
uncommon.
it's been really fun for me to make it's not a switch, excuse me, it's not a switch because like I said, I was a power guy. So when I show somebody how to do something, it's very easy for me to remember what I did. And I like just get your arms together and do this. But when I started getting some people that looked like they were better suited to being a speed, single arm type, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I had to start studying it. And I'm like, why is it effective for these guys? And I go, I always notice the speed and I noticed this arm being up. And this is my thinking. I've never had anybody prove this or not, but I say a lot of things that I've become convinced about just because of kind of always being in the lab. Like I'm technically
Yeah.
always in the lab every day when I go out to a jump practice, and it can be with any number of different clients. So I'm like, okay, the higher this arm is when you put your foot on the ground, like you were talking about that contact time, right? From heel to toe off. So if I put my heel on the ground and to toe off, that's a remarkably short period of time. And granted, a little longer for power jumpers, basically based on speed. If I'm moving through quicker, I'm going to be on the ground a shorter amount of time. If I'm going slower, I can exert more force through there and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, so what is the advantage to the speed guy? The speed itself does not give me any lift. Would you agree with that general premise? Like speed can turn into lift, but it really needs to be applied with a great curve and all those other things. Like,
Yeah.
as far
Yeah,
as
that's true for a lot, dude.
jumping straight up in the air with as much jump as you can, most of us don't think single arm. But I started watching old NBA films. This might be interesting to you because I don't know if I know it's still pretty big in Europe. And that's one of the things about American basketball. I think basketball's done a better job than football as far as spreading around the world, right?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of Europeans that come over and dominate NBA basketball, right? But they've got the old American guys like Dr. J or Michael Jordan or whatever. And you see these guys go up with one hand, right? They're dribbling, they palm the ball, and then they just reach up and jump and they can touch the top of the backboard, and there's a single arm right there. They're not using because they got the ball in one hand. And if they don't take it up with two
Yeah.
hands, which some of them do, I could dunk going up with two hands easily, but you can also do it with one. So I've started teaching my kids to just run, get that lead arm up and pretend you're going to run up and, dunk the ball over the crossbar with that hand, right? As far as that goes. Yeah. But my idea is that the higher that arm gets, the less I'm really doing it to change my center of mass so much. When you reach both arms back below your center of mass and then drive them up, and you bring your knee from below your center of mass and drive it up, that's a big change in your overall center of mass as you're going through takeoff, right? Whereas this lead arm is already up. So for someone that's 6'9" like you, if I get that arm up over my head, what have I already done? Well, I've already raised my center of mass without jumping yet, right? Before your heel hits the ground, you're getting a higher center of mass overall body-wise. But can I change it as much now since this arm's already up? I don't know.
Yeah. No, but that's interesting. And what I wonder is like, I guess it also comes down to like your natural proclivities. Like, I guess some people are more suited for speed jumping. I think in my case, I don't know, like I have very like mobile ankles and like I don't really have that ankle stiffness that
right.
So I think in my case that would make speed jumping a bit harder and like power jumping comes more natural to me.
Right.
So I guess like, yeah, I don't necessarily think speed jumping is for everyone, but probably the majority of people.
It depends too, though. People. I'm looking at your lifting, Fabian. I mean, what I saw when I started backtracking through your stuff is this is what I do, right? I'm constantly getting athletes and trainers to come through my Instagram. That's pretty much where I've been living. So, and that to me, I love the fact that you showed what you do when you train, because to me, it's one thing to see drills. And it's another thing if you're doing some sprinting or you're jumping up and down bleachers, or you're doing box drills or whatever it is that you could be doing. What I saw mostly was lifting. I saw you lifting, 345 on your cleans from the ground. And I'm like, when I was doing hang cleans in college at 286, and I had people tell me, they go, "Are you a decathlete? Like you look really, really big," because I was like, I was 6'3", 195. Now I'm wondering, you at 6'9", how much weight are you at 6'9"?
Yeah, when I jumped 230 that 2 years ago, I jumped 230, which is 7'6.5". Then I weighed 216.
Yeah, so yeah,
I'm hovering around there, like I'm around between 215 and 220, honestly, when I compete.
You're still not really heavy for that height though, for that
size. No, that's true. Like I have a pretty wide frame, like wide shoulders and all that, but most of my muscle are gathered in my legs.
Right.
And I do think, like you mentioned, like when you go through my feed, you'll see a lot of lifting. And I do think that could give a misleading picture of what my training actually looks like.
Right.
So I would argue that I probably do less strength training than most other track athletes I come across. Like I do way less volume. Like let's say during the off season when I'm doing the most amount of strength training, I'm doing maybe 2 sessions of barbell training. When it comes to cleans, for example, like I do 3 sets of cleans per week.
Right. How many reps in those 3 sets?
Yeah, like let's take the time leading up to the 352 hang clean that I did. I would do like, I started off that off season doing like 5 reps, 3 sets of 5 reps, but I would only catch the last one. So I did 4 high pulls, only catching the last one. Because frankly, like my catching position isn't the best, so I figured like I'm getting I'm still like getting the power out of the movement, so I might as well just catch the last.
Right.
I would do 3 sets of 5 reps, gradually going down over the mesocycles to 3 sets of 3 reps, and every 4th week I would max out.
Right.
And that's in I think 8 weeks or 12 weeks, I took my personal best from 140, so that's around that's 308 pounds
308
to 352 pounds, 160.
Yeah.
So just by coming in fresh session and applying like absolute maximum amount of force. Like they don't need much volume.
Yeah. I agree with all the stuff that you're saying. I don't want to make it sound like, first of all, I went to the school of American overtraining. So I literally since, for my first 2 years, we didn't have a high jump coach when I was in college. I was getting trained by two of the other jumpers, and they would go in the weight room, but they weren't lifting, that much. And they were both thin, and fast and light. And, Del Davis jumped 7.25 at NC2A finals as a junior. And Lee Balkin ended up jumping about that high too. He jumped like 7.3 in high school when he was, 18. Well, I got there, I was only jumping 210, and I immediately put on 15 pounds when I grew into my body. I was 6'3", 180 in high school, and all of a sudden I was 6'3", 195, and I couldn't get off the ground. So I started lifting. When I got my squats up over 400 pounds, all of a sudden I jumped 218, and I started jumping better because I had more power. So that's how I always knew I was a power guy.
So so that's the thing. Like power jumpers, we can kind of get away with that. Like us gaining weight doesn't have to be doesn't have to be negative as long as your relative strength increases along with that. But one issue that I've like kind of run into is that you can't just infinitely keep raising your relative strength while getting heavier, because while it's pretty easy to like raise the strength of your glutes, your quads, hamstrings, the big muscles, like your lower legs and feet aren't gonna keep up.
Right. Yeah.
So like you kind of got to balance the force with staying injury free and having strong calves equation.
Shins, ankles, knees, all that stuff. They take a pounding, right? And then what was it? My favorite saying to my high jumpers is, why do you think God gave birds hollow bones? Right? It's like less weight you have to carry at your strength. And literally I could give a big lecture at any conference, high jumpers. I don't care who the level is. I'd be like, hey, strength to weight ratio is everything. It's just like getting an airplane off the ground. Either you keep increasing the power of the jets and ignore the weight, or you do what the first guys did, the Orville brothers, whatever they did, they built those things out of really light wood, because it's like they didn't have the power to get it up in the air. So you try to get it as light as you can and as aerodynamic as you can, right?
Yeah, sure.
I find everything that we're talking about is so awesome. You need to, if you don't mind, I would love to see and do a post of you and show the comparisons as you went through, all the way up. This is one thing people always ask me, what did you do? And I'm like, I remember it, but I have no video. I mean, I have nothing, because we were in the old age of, there just wasn't a lot of video. Anything that I have on videotape, the videotapes are all falling apart or they're lost. Like I have a couple pictures, like still pictures of me doing things, and that's it. It's like, did you really jump in high school, college? And I'm like, I know I did, but I don't really have any proof.
No. Yeah, I get that. That's the advantage of jumping today.
Right.
No, but I can for sure send you, I get good like videos of me jumping from like 14 years of age.
Right.
So you'll see like kind of I was never like a super fast runner in my approach or anything, but I definitely, my like swing leg was definitely way higher, and definitely didn't scrape my leg, and I did used to do the single arm. So I think it would be interesting.
It'd be fun to see the transformation, because I started talking about the cycling and got sidetracked, but one of the things I was talking with Barb about there was, I always said foot draggers, and I used to say this just to 2 years ago. I was like, I can't see a foot scraper ever jumping higher than X. I think I said 7.4 at the time, and we were over here watching the Mount Sac meet 2 years ago, and a kid from Texas Tech, he graduated from Texas Tech, but he jumped 7.5 that day, and he was a big foot scraper. Like he would, and the thing that I always said that was negative about it, what I was taught was negative about it was, well, you're lowering your center of mass, probably taking a really long last step and dragging that foot on the ground. And I understand the power aspect because you're really driving that knee up. And I'm like, I like that part, but it just seems like it's going too slow. But you've raised the bar on that exponentially, because it took me a minute to realize. I went back and watched your video, and I see the dust cloud from your foot. Yeah. Like he's dragging his foot, and he's jumped. Was that the 7.7 jump, or was that a 7.6?
Yeah, well, both of them probably.
Yeah, yeah. But, so
I mean, it's definitely, obviously, it's possible. Like, I mean, Sotomayor himself is dragged his foot, and Uchov as well from Russia.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like back in the days during the straddle era, everyone was dragging their foot.
Right.
So yeah, it's but most people probably aren't suited for it. Yeah.
Well, I find it, your height and the lean back angle was tremendous. I think you could see on there the program that I used had you at 30 degrees. So this is
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm trying to come up with a way. And I guess I really only need the right software and 3 cameras, but I want to get 3 cameras that are, so that you can do that rotating around thing and get the shot wherever you want, because it's just 3 dimensional or whatever. But that shot where you're looking straight down the bar and I can see you from the side. Because what I've been preaching to my clients is, look, all my athletes, when you're running up and you lean, you've got 2 leans going. You lean back and you do a phenomenal job, Fabian, of that. I've seen your last 2 steps. I was trained by a little Romanian coach named Baru Elias, and he was at Long Beach City College out here for years. And he had 2 7/8 jumpers in his stable. And he used to teach me in that heavy Romanian accent. He'd be like, "Hey, you bad guy, you go heel toe, last 2 steps, right?"
Okay.
And I'm like, heel toe, last 2 steps. I'm like, I never even asked why. But now that I've been coaching for almost 40 years, I always repeat it because when I'm watching it on film, it just seems obvious to me that begins part of that lean back process where, your head and the rest of your body get back behind your foot to give you a chance to come up and hit vertical, right? If my head's right over my foot when I put it on the ground, my odds of hitting vertical go away. There's just no time, right? I'm going to blow right through my plant. So I see on yours, I mean, your second foot back is almost better than your first. And that's usually the other way around. If you watch most people, almost every high jumper will hit with a decent heel toe on their takeoff foot, but not one right before it. But you can see yours is just up, like boom. And I noticed that right away. And I noticed the straight back lean angle and your leg. Maybe it's part of your single arm training, but your plant leg is straight. Like there's no bend when you hit it heel strike.
Yeah, for sure. When I'm jumping well and I'm in good shape, it's pretty damn stiff at takeoff.
Right.
But I mean, it's interesting what you say about like heel toe, and all that. But like honestly, like that was never something I would like consciously thought about or was coached to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like that specific like heel toe. That just happened naturally from jumping much, and like a lot of my jumping has just been me obviously with my coach there, but also doing a lot of jumps alone and then problem solving by myself and like gradually working towards some kind of jumping technique that works for my body and allows me to generate like more force of takeoff. Yeah. I also yeah, I can't say I'm the biggest fan of like a lot of drills and that sort of stuff. Like I don't like making things that complicated. But I guess obviously like it would depend on the individual, but in my case, I have like the athletic awareness to move in a good manner. So what it more comes down to is like simple cues like be aggressive as hell the last 2 steps. And yeah, like it's pretty easy. If I'm not injured, I trust my body and I'm aggressive, then I will jump good technically.
Now, do you find yourself getting farther and farther away from the bar as it goes up? Do you have any way of doing that? Do you in a real general way, do you kind of gradually start pulling away or do you stay in the same spot?
Well, if we were talking, do you mean like during the course of a competition as the bar raises?
Yeah, literally from height to height. Do you end up farther away at the end than you were at the beginning?
I would say like when I've been jumping really well, what often happens is as I get up to the higher heights, I will be even more eager to be aggressive, causing the first few steps of my approach to be even longer, and then like having me like forcing me to break down so I don't get too close to the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Like often the jumps at the lower heights can look better because you're taking it more easy in the approach, and then you have in the beginning, and you have plenty of space to accelerate and use up the room.
Right. Yeah.
So ideally I would probably jump further away from the bar, but sometimes I accidentally get a bit closer to the
Yeah.
bar.
Yeah. So that was another thing, Elias. Most of these little bon mots that I throw out of wisdom are from him, and he's almost like my little Yoda. I swear I hear him when I'm teaching kids because he had a way of talking that it would stick with me. So it was one of the things he always said was 2 more steps, 2 more inches, which was like when we were doing drills, if we did a 1-step drill or a 3-step drill or a 5-step drill, like once you hit a height that you couldn't make, right, from that particular number of steps, right, from 1 step, I can't remember what my best was, but maybe 6'1" or something, I don't know. And then, if I took 3 jumps at 6'3" and couldn't make it, he'd go, okay, 2 more steps, right, go from 1 to 3. And as soon as you gave me 2 more steps, I would make that height. So it would be 2 more steps, 2 more inches, at least at a minimum, because as soon as you add steps, you add a little bit more speed and you get more height.
Yeah, of course. Now I get what you mean. I thought you were talking about like the takeoff distance from the bar.
Yeah. Well, that was one. And then the other one that he told me was not a hard and fast rule, but he would also say, as the bar goes up, you should move your approach back, basically about 2 inches for every 5 centimeters. So, and I found that to be very important because same way that you're talking about, when I get more aggressive, I only jumped at 225 maybe 6 times in my life. And, one time after making 220 and one time after making 222. So I remember running at it. And the first time I'd had a good day already. And I don't remember if I moved back, but I do remember being a little bit cramped and thinking if I'd had a little more space. I took one good jump that day at it. And I was like, man, if I'd have been a little bit farther out, and I may have forgotten Elias's rule because I'd done 2 PBs in a row. So I went 220, 220 was a PR. No, 221. I went 221 and then no. I forget. It was 2.25, then 3.5. I know the second was 222. So the other one might've been 219, but they were both personal bests, which I'd never done since the first day that I high jumped probably. And then when it went to 4.5, I don't remember if I moved because I think I was just too excited. And then 2 weeks later, I got to jump at it again because I jumped 2.5 and went right to 4.5. And on that day, I tried to get really fast. Like I tried to pick my speed. I got real aggressive and I was blowing through my plant that day. I don't think it had anything to do with how far I was. I just couldn't handle the speed that I was trying to put into it.
Are you telling me that like your coach, when he talked about moving back and getting more height, like as you jumped higher, you need to move back your approach, take more steps. Are you saying that you would do that during the course of a competition? That you would like add more steps to the approach?
During the competition, it was just 2 inches, like literally this far farther back. Really? So it wasn't any change in steps. It was I believe I had a 9-step standing approach. Okay. Like I didn't switch to a rolling start till I started coaching because I was just lazy and I thought it was always easier to get moving if I could just run into my mark. So I was like, I started thinking simpler was better. And that, like one guy that amazes me is watching Brandon Stark, for instance, because he's way back there. And Bondarenko is the other one. Like I can never tell where Bondarenko is starting from or if he's actually counting his steps because it looks like he's running 100 meters before he even does anything. And Stark's the same way. And Stark doesn't roll into his start. He just takes off. So it's like I've got early stuff on him on his feed where he takes 16 steps. Now he's down to 14. But it's still those are 2 of the longer approaches. Barshim is into a 7, I think, Yeah,
another super long approach guy is Chinese guy, Shang Gui.
Yeah.
Jumped like 238.
Wow.
I know it was like an insanely long approach. Like
but I always think when you're that long, unless you do a million run throughs, there's more things that can go wrong,
because the speed you can build up in 14 or 16 steps, you can for sure build up to that speed in 10 steps.
Right.
Like you're not gonna be maxing out your 14-step approach anyway. So but I guess like high jump can be weird in that sense that what's good on paper might have to like take a backseat in like to what feels good for you subjectively and allows you
Right.
to find good rhythm in your approach.
Sure.
Like I've sometimes when I jumped to 33, I did a standing 10 stride approach or 10 step approach.
Mm-hmm.
But then like a couple of years later when I jumped to 30, I did a rolling 5 step approach.
Yeah.
And that was simply because at that point in time, that felt more natural and rhythmic for me.
Right. That's the one thing I love. I don't know about you. You know, you've been, how old are you, Fabian?
I'm 26.
26. So,
Yeah.
and where are you ranked in Sweden right now? Are you number one, are you in the top three, top five?
Yeah. This season I haven't jumped that well, but I'm tied for number one in Sweden this year.
Okay. So you've been there for a while now, right? It's been,
Yeah, but if you check on like the height, if you go by height jumped, I've probably been number one since 2017.
uh-huh. Okay. So did you go to the Olympics in 2021?
No, actually, I guess part of that is to blame. Like I guess the new ranking system kind of doesn't benefit me. Uh, since I mean the new system, you want to collect 5 decently good competitions with good rankings.
Right.
But since I've had a lot of injuries, it often makes it very hard for me to get 5 good competitions in a year. Like if I'm
Right.
injured an entire season.
Yeah.
So that year I jumped to 30, which every other Olympic before that would have been enough. But yeah, I was outside the ranking. Uh, so I didn't go to the Olympics.
That's crazy.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Over here we have the trials, the Olympic trials for the Americans. If you finish in the top three, you go. It's just a 1 day thing
yeah.
because you
No,
have to
I was
qualify
just
and
simply too
jump.
far down on the world ranking. That's
Mm-hmm.
just it. But yeah, so if the World Championships or the Olympics had been a couple of months later, then I would have had the like a good enough ranking because then I had time to collect some more good competitions.
Yeah, I think sometimes they're making it too difficult. I like the idea. I know that there are a lot of countries out there that have, you know, everybody has their own country's trials, whatever that is, you know. And then sometimes there's an Olympic standard that you can have three jumpers jump off forever in this one thing, and yet none of them have reached the Olympic standard. So you actually can't even send anybody because, you know, say you don't have a jumper that can jump 7.3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is. And so that to me always made sense. But if you have a standard and you say this is it, and you can go if you can jump this high, and then in your country there's 20 guys like that, and you can only send three, it makes sense to have a competition and figure out who's the
Yeah,
best
sure.
and let them go. You know, I don't
Yeah,
understand
I mean,
the other way. It's too complex.
yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I get the necessity for that. If you look at like the US 100
Yeah.
meter team, like you got like probably, yeah,
Yeah.
over 10 guys making the world standard. You got to have some way of picking
Yeah.
three.
But it sounds like you were the
Yeah.
number one guy. Like if you're the number one guy in
Uh,
Sweden, why wouldn't they want you to go?
no, and well, it wasn't a decision made by the Swedish committee. It was I simply like didn't meet a high enough world ranking to be picked by the Olympic committee.
Hmm.
So it wasn't like a fault of the Swedes of the Swedish committee. It was just I just hadn't jumped
Yeah.
good enough for enough competitions.
Oh,
Uh,
well,
so for me, it just didn't benefit me. But yeah, whatever.
yeah. Well,
Go for next year instead.
so how are you doing now? Are you back? Are you injury free? Are you training? What's
Uh,
going on?
I'm pretty much injury free, but yeah, haven't jumped that high like this season. I haven't been able to be like as aggressive in my jumping as I've been wanting to because of like being injured a lot in the past. Like it can sometimes be hard to get back to that aggression because you don't quite
Right.
trust your body.
Right. You're waiting for
Uh,
something to break. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I'm pretty happy with how my body feels now. So I've got one more competition left here in Sweden next weekend, and no matter how it goes, I know I'll like enter the off season with a physically very good body that will allow me to put in like really good
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
So either way, I'm like looking forward to this off season and like the indoor season.
So help us out because here in the U.S., things, I'm sure some things are similar and some things are different. But like depending on where you are in the US, for instance, I grew up on the West Coast in California, and there's almost no indoor anything because
Yeah,
the weather's too nice here. There's no point in having an indoor training facility when you can go outdoors and train almost all year round. So
yeah,
we don't have the indoor stuff. Like I coach at a university that has an indoor competition, but when we go to compete for the right to go to that competition, our marks are outdoor marks. So we go
mm,
to a meet and they go, okay, you did whatever you did, and that meets the standard for here. And now we'll go back east somewhere and jump and in North Dakota or
yeah,
Chicago or somewhere where there's snow on the ground and you have to compete indoors. And that's
yeah,
always, it's in a way, it's a rude shock too, because indoors is so different from outdoors. You know, most of the athletes haven't ever jumped indoors. So you're like, oh, yeah, by the way, you're running on these weird surfaces and it's really cramped and, you know, they don't like it. So it's like,
yeah.
it's a
Yeah, I
nice,
guess it can mess a bit with your brain with a perspective and the cramped atmosphere if you're not used to it.
yeah,
But
yeah. And it
then
depends
here
on
it's
the,
just like a necessity here in Sweden. And this
sure,
entire summer we've struggled to get over 70 degrees outside for real.
really.
So it's been hovering around 65 this entire 2 month summer, which we get.
Yeah,
So yeah, I basically train, but on the other hand, we have a lot of good indoor facilities here
right.
because of the cold weather. So like in Stockholm, which is where I live, we have like 4 or 5 facilities, and
Uh,
that's a city with its like metropolitan areas around 2 million people. You get five
yeah,
indoor facilities. So yeah, I train indoors basically from like mid September to early May.
yeah, yeah. That makes
Yes,
sense.
it's just like better than outdoors during
Sure.
that time.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about the ground being wet or snow or too cold or warming up. Yeah. It's and then so when do you start training now? You said you got one more meet, then you're going to enter the off
Yeah,
season healthy. Then you start training right away for indoors, or how does that
uh,
go?
yeah. So I'm probably gonna have like a 2 week period of like I guess like kind of active recovery sort of stuff. Like where I take a break from the goal focused track and field specific exercises. I might like maintain some things in the gym just for like my joint health,
Yeah.
but then I'll just be like trying out things that are fun. Like I might go climbing, might like play some basketball or something.
Right. Right.
Just like stay active for 2 weeks, and then yeah, like around September 18th or something,
Mhm.
I'll start my off season preparation.
And then when does indoor season start for you? When are you going to start competing?
Yeah, so it's for us it's usually later than you guys in the US, or at least the college athletes. So we start like usually like end of January.
Hmm.
So it's like a pretty short season. It's like 4 or 5 weeks, I guess.
Okay.
So pretty intense. You basically compete every weekend.
They
Yeah,
still have world indoor championships too, right? So you,
yeah, yeah. I guess that's usually the beginning of March.
okay.
So if I were to qualify there, it would be like a 6 week
So is
season.
that in your goal setting in your head? Have you got some
Yeah.
goals for the season that includes that, or is it that important?
Honestly, now I haven't really thought about it. I mainly think about the Olympics and just jumping as high as I can. But I know if I like get a good period of training, like anything can happen.
Hmm.
Like it can turn around very quickly for me once I like start to get my confidence and aggression back in my jumping.
Now, do the indoor marks count for the that whole ranking process and
Yeah, yeah,
heights?
they do. So that's a good thing. But on the other hand, like with the new ranking system, you get like a certain amount of bonus points, depending on like the standard of the competition, whether it's like a diamond league,
Right.
you have all this bunch of A, B, C, D categories. And the indoor competitions usually give like way less bonus points.
Hmm.
So like it's easier to collect points outdoors.
Right. Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. Barbara's been teaching me about that a little bit because they have the same,
Yeah.
obviously the same thing in Canada. So it's
Yeah.
it's different. It's really a different thing to get a handle on. But I'm learning. I'm learning. Okay. So
Yeah.
we get you through indoor. and then you transition to outdoor. How does that come about? Because the Olympics don't start until late July or early August or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, usually after an indoor season, I'll take like maybe 1 week where I take it a bit easy, let my mind and body recover a bit,
Yeah,
and then it will be like the sort of off season basic training will be like way shorter than during
yeah,
the fall. So we're probably looking at like one mesocycles, like 4 weeks of like basic off-season training, and then like then you really need to get into some sort of specific training and like high jumping again.
right.
And then I'll probably do like some competition early May, but then really get going like early June. So that's like, because I see you guys, you're competing like March, and like the collegiate season ends early June if you're lucky enough
Yeah,
to make it to the A's. But
right.
that's when I start my season, so it's a bit different.
Yeah. Now you understand that season. Did you ever come over here and compete, or did you stay over
Yeah,
there?
actually, well, I actually went to Wake Forest University
Uh-huh.
for one semester, spring of 2016. But I like hurt myself playing basketball like a week before I went, so I never ended up doing a single meet, and I was just there for one semester. But I mean, I gave me like a bit of insight into the American sort of
Right.
collegiate system and how you train a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was interesting. But I never competed in the US.
Okay. So you came over, but you didn't compete, and you're still over there. Then when you start competing over there, is it just in? Do you say have a Swedish kind of season, and then you go to European kind of championships, and then you go from there? How does that all work?
Yeah, so if you're like the Swedish season and the European season, they run like concurrently.
Right.
Like if you're a good jumper, international level, it'll probably go like there's some Swedish meets, mix in some meets on the European tour, go kind of back and forth. And then in Sweden we have our Swedish championships. Traditionally they've been like end of August, but they've started moving them a bit earlier so people can use the ranking points from the Swedish championships to
Right.
qualify for
Sure.
big championships. But yeah, so it's kind of running together with the European season.
So is your Swedish championships aren't really even like a for us, there would be, I don't even know in an Olympic year how it runs here either, but I know we used to have like the tax, it used to be the athletic congress, and now it's just maybe it's the US championships, but it's still always the US Olympic trials where
Yeah.
everything comes to a head. So, but for you guys, like you said, that Swedish championship that finishes up, and then is it, you say there's an
Yeah.
Olympic committee? Do they make a choice, or you just look at the points at that point and go,
Yeah.
you guys are in?
So that's the thing. Like, yeah, we've never had like the Swedish championships have never played the roles like of the US trials like it does for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're just like our country just doesn't have enough people to have like more than 3 people per event that would like qualify.
Right.
That would be exceptionally rare that in any event there would be more than 3 people competing for 3 spots.
Right.
But I guess, yeah. So if that were to happen, I'm not quite sure how they would do it. They would probably like go back and look at the system, like sort of add everything they've done together.
Yeah.
And it definitely wouldn't be as hyper focused on that one meet as it is in the US.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So it's very different there. Like, yeah.
This just popped into my head, but we're talking Sweden, and so I'm thinking of the great Swedish jumpers before you. Have you had a
Yeah.
chance to meet either Joberg or Stefan Holm?
Well, I've met Stefan Holm a lot actually. I've spoken to him a couple of times, and the guy who I'm this year sharing the #1 spot in Sweden with is his son.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, I compete quite a bit against his son Melvin. So I see him like quite a lot at competitions,
Right.
and it's pretty fun. Like I would say, I was like jumping when I was a kid, but it was like Stefan Holm winning the Olympics in 2004 when I was 7.
Right.
That was what really motivated me to start doing track and field. Like that's when I told my parents to like sign me up.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, pretty fun that I'm competing as his son now.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch his stuff. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen a lot of the stuff I've seen. Like he's got those 6 foot tall hurdles where
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
running and he can just jump over, he could at that time, but jump 6 feet. And I would always see the knee drive come across and then he'd go up and bring it around like 4 of those in a row, which is mind bending for me. And then
yeah.
I've got a couple interesting shots. I don't know if you've ever seen the demonstration. There's like a Japanese scientist
Yeah,
shows
I've
that
seen
thing
I've
where
seen all of that.
yeah, he throws the pole at the ground, right, and does that,
Yeah,
and that's really interesting stuff.
that's yeah, that's a classic. I think yeah, I've seen basically all of high jumping that there is on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. What
Yeah,
do, Now? What do you think? I have this thing, and I like I said, I just have my spin on it, and we both mentioned a couple different things as we're coming along. Number one, you're saying you don't like to get too technical. You like to kind of feel your way through it and find what's working. And I think that's good advice for coaches out there because I tell my kids this all the time. Like I don't just take all my kids and go, okay, you ready? This was the Troy Haynes sky high and fly method. It got me to 7.3. I went to UCLA, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares, first of all. And number two, not everybody can do what I did the way that I did it, right? I can't show you how to do the double arm, this and that, if you're a speed guy. So like, I don't ever even start out telling them, look, this is the way that we do it here. It's like, I got to see what it is that you do, what it is that you do well, and some people I've been like, you know what? I want to try the single with you just to see. And sometimes like, oh no, you're definitely a 2 arm power guy. Okay. And I mean, I've had people come out to me and they don't even know which foot they're going to jump off of. Right. So I'm just like, okay,
yeah. Then you can't start like giving maybe advanced technical tips.
Yeah.
Then you got to start somewhere else.
But there's all kinds of different ways to do it. Right. So what do you think is the most important thing for high jumpers? If we got some young jumpers out there listening to you going, wow, this guy jumped 7.3/4. What's the most important technical thing that you do as you're, running up or taking off the ground that gets you to jump so high?
I would answer the number one most important thing would be to accelerate into the plant.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's so important to not slow down as you're coming into those last couple steps
right.
into the takeoff position. So the one accelerating to the plant. And that, for me at least, accelerating like that will allow me to achieve sort of an inward lean when I'm running my curve.
Right.
So like that's what I mean when I say I don't like overcomplicating things. I'm very aware of technique and like what you're supposed to do. But for me, simple cues like that will often have like positive side effects of, oh, now my curve all of a sudden looks good and I have a good inward lean because I was being aggressive running. But honestly, that's just the number one tip: accelerate into the plant.
Right.
And then obviously keep your chest high as you're running, because if you're like sloped over, that will make it very hard to like kind of get in that lean back position, which even if you're a speed jumper and you're not leaning back quite as much as me, you are gonna see some sort of backward lean.
Yes.
When running your foot, and that will be very hard to achieve if you like sloped over. So yeah. Apart from that, I don't know. Like once again, like a common issue for a lot of jumpers would be that at takeoff you're kind of throwing yourself into the bar,
right,
and like not getting all the power upwards.
Yeah,
but I would say a lot of that is solved by accelerating into the plant.
Right. So especially if it gives you that lean, like you're talking about too. If it gets you over here, then you have more time to apply force and you have a better chance of hitting vertical, those kinds of things. Whereas I did a demonstration last week, Fabian, where I ran as fast as I could, and I'm almost 60 years old, but I ran super fast and leaned away. But then as I got to the plant, I purposely went across, like full blast. Like I just went from leaning far away to going across, and from driving my arms this way to driving them that way. And I even drove my knee that way. And I go, look, your momentum's going this way. It's actually all the forces are working against you. We've got to stop those forces going that way and make them go up. Right. So how do I do that? I'm going to lean over here. I'm going to lean back. I'm going to drive my knee. You watch the number one thing I've been preaching is knee drive, that up and across. Like we're talking about that stick thing that we saw with Stefan Holm. His knee comes, I mean, all the way across, like full blast, up and across, quick, right? And boom. And I'm like, I think that's one of the hugest elements because I believe it stops that swing through a lot of times, you know, the better that gets.
Sure.
But it's like, you know, I showed him mine and I just go, I just blasted across. Like I didn't get any lift at all. Right. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, so kind of by degrees, the more that knee comes around, the more I tilt this way, you know, like you said, and everybody's different in how they get there. That's the beauty. Like I've even found, have you seen any of these, the ones where there's some girls now that have both arms up when their foot hits the ground? I call it like they'll go one arm and then the other arm and then their foot hits the ground and they can't get anything out of these arms because they're already up. You know what I mean? It's crazy. I've seen them jump like maybe 170, 175 in high school over here. And I'm like, that's decent, but it's going to do nothing on the world level. I haven't seen anybody jump really high. I did see one English heptathlete who was at about a 175 with the double arm.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I mean, that is, to me, that is very unnatural. Like
right?
It feels very
exact opposite of what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, but yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, like you said, it's all about just counteracting forces. Like you want all of the momentum, the forward momentum turn into like vertical momentum. And then it's just placing your joints in the right angle, but also then being physically prepared to withstand the forces at those angles.
I got another question for you. These are things that I'm loving talking with somebody like yourself. The last person I had on the show who's jumped as high as you was Doug Nordquist, who was on
234, right?
He jumped 230. He jumped 236. He jumped.
Dwight Stones was 7'8", 234, right?
Right. Dwight Stones is technically a cousin of Doug's, and Doug jumped at Washington State when I was at UCLA, but he had graduated before I started. He's a little bit older than I am, and then he made the Olympic team in 1984, the one in LA. Right. He jumped 7.7 at the trials, came in second to Dwight. That's when Dwight jumped 7.8 and broke the American record at that time and made his third Olympic team at like 30 years old, right? So Doug made that team, and then he jumped 8 3/4. So he and we talked about a lot of different stuff. We didn't really get that technical. So it's been bugging me. When you come up and put your foot plant on the ground, right? And I see the great heel toe. I love that. Where do you put your foot? Do you point your foot at the back standard, or do you point it down the plane of the bar? And do you even notice?
Honestly, my feet, I would say, but my feet are also like slightly naturally angled outwards. Mm-hmm. My foot is planted basically parallel with the bar.
Right.
I would say, or very close to parallel with the bar. Which is like, I guess some people deem that more risky. But
on your ankles,
my ligaments are very mobile. Like I've never had any issues with any tendons or ligaments in my foot.
Right.
So for me, like that's something I can handle. That's just what comes.
Strong ankles, yeah. The thing that I've been trying to tell my guys is I go, well, I just can't see how you can get the knee across when your foot's angled at the back, corner. I think it's harder. Like I do a drill sometimes, but I have them run straight at the bar, like you're going to hurdle it, and put that foot straight. And I go, when you try to drive that knee around, it's a hypercompensation drill to try to get them to do the Stefan Holm kind of knee drive. Like you really got to bang it around there to get your back to the bar, right? But I think if your shoulders and your hips are closed, like to get my shoulders and my hips at a 90-degree angle, when I put my foot on the ground, it's parallel to the bar. I mean, that's a no-brainer to get it around there. I don't understand pointing it in the back corner. So.
No, that's true. Like, that doesn't happen a lot for me, at least. Because, like, I feel like that's often when you're struggling to kind of block the forces and get a vertical momentum, something that often will solve that is simply just trying to achieve a greater inward lean during the curve, during the curve run.
Okay, one last real technical. Right. Sorry. My brain started kicking out all these questions. When you jump now, and for my listeners out there, Fabian has a really big gather where you cross your arms, right? And then you reach way back. And I always call this, I tell my jumpers, I say, you reach back for power, right? I go, a short arm stroke doesn't get much, especially for a power jumper. If your hands are in front of your hips, when your foot hits the ground, you're going to get a short stroke. It might be quick, but you're not going to get a lot of lift out of it. I'm like, when you watch volleyball players or even that Russian figure skater, they reach back behind them with both arms and drive them up, right? And I go, my supposition is, again, based on center of mass, and I was looking at yours, you get your hands up pretty high. Like I've seen some people go here fast and chin high. And I'm always like, my coach would yell at me and go, dude, you're not using your arms. You got to drive them up like you're going to jump up and grab the rim, or like you're a middle blocker in volleyball, right? So I'm going to jump straight up, get my arms up there fast. But then I tell my kids, I go, hey, once they're up there, they're worthless. Like you can't leave them up there because you won't spin, right? So either pull them down to your hips, or you can reach, one hand to your foot, like some people do. And usually that backside arm tends to drop on its own anyway. But I'm just curious, does that even occur to you? Is it a point of emphasis? Do you feel better if you get your hands higher? Do you feel like that's too slow?
That's honestly something I've never consciously thought about or like focused too much on when it comes to my technical training. I do get my hands high, as you say, because like I spend quite a bit of time on the ground when I take off. Like I have my ground contact time measured on a 223 jump, like a 7-4 jump. And my ground contact time was 260 milliseconds, which is like extremely long.
That's like 0.2 of a second, right?
Yeah, exactly, more than 0.2 of a second. So then this I really like when I'm at the point of leaving the ground, my hands are probably over 8 feet in the air.
Sure.
So,
yeah. But they don't stay there, because as soon as you're done with that,
no, for sure. Back down, because, right? Especially maybe you can attest to that as well. But us power jumpers also tend to have harder achieving rotation over the bar.
Yes.
So then you really need to bring in your limbs a bit to make your body smaller and rotate.
Bend your knees up to 90 degrees. Yep. Get your head back a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure. I would say that like getting an effective and efficient like bar clearance just comes naturally to me with enough reps.
Right.
I just jump a lot in practice, and I want to
start to figure it out.
Body will find a way to just get an efficient clearance.
Well, one thing that's interesting to me watching you is that I can see, even in fast speed, and that's hard for a lot of times, but I can see what I call all 5 phases. I can see you run straight. I can see you run through your curve. I can see you take off. I can see you fly. And then I can see you lay out. There's no blending. Like you go very smoothly from phase to phase, because like you said, your takeoff phase takes a while. You hit pretty good vertical, and then you got to wait to go up, because you're jumping at some high heights there. 233 is way up there. For those of you that aren't listening, that's 7.3/4. That's a lot of air time. And then I see you, once your knee gets pretty close to the bar, you've got a nice little hip punch there, and you can pop your hips up in the air and get your head back over, right? And a little rotation pop there. So I'm like, those are all the things I preach. I'm like, hey, I don't want you blending your takeoff, your flight, and your layout into one move. And that might not seem like anything to somebody like you because you jump so high, but when they're first learning, they can blow right through the vertical, and then they're right on top of the bar, and all of a sudden their head's going back. I'm like, hey, your foot is on the ground and there's parts of your body that are already over the bar. I go, that's insane. You got to go up first and then let everything fall over towards the bar, and then we can lay out. Like that should be way later.
Well, that's definitely, I think, a route a lot of people new to the sport tend to want to focus on, maybe the bar clearance and bending their backs over the bar. But what they have to realize is that the work is done on the ground and at takeoff. Like if you achieve good angles during your approach and you take off vertically, like you'll achieve rotation, which will make your bar clearance good.
Yes. You don't have to do as much work. Yeah, I've been preaching that. I'm like, just go fast, lean, go fast through your curve, get as much air as you can. And then, I can teach you how to fly later. but don't start worrying about it in the middle of your takeoff. Like you got to finish the takeoff. If your toe's still on the ground and your head's already going back, you've, in a way, to me, you've already quit on the jump because you're stealing from flight. It's like I need to fly first. And every time I emphasize that point, I go, okay, let's say that you make this jump, okay, and you're still going vertical, and now you're in this, big C position like this, right? But you're not a C, you're kind of straight up and down C. So I'm like, I need you to wait to get all the way around here where your head and feet are like this and you look like a rainbow, right? And you do that. But it's like, if you do that, let's say you get away with it, you hit this amazing layout, you arch your way over it and you hold it forever and you pull and it wiggles and it stays on. I'm like, okay, now what? What are you going to do at the next height? How are you going to milk that same cow? How are you going to get more out of that layout? Like you said, you can't get a better layout than that. You got everything you could out of it on that one. So now what? I'm like, well, you're going to have to run faster. You have to lean more to your left and you have to hit vertical and you have to wait. That's what happens as the bar goes up.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, the sport is called high jump. So in the end, it's going to be about jumping high vertically.
Not the high layout. Yeah.
It becomes secondary, like past a certain point, of course.
I think for some people, I don't know if you've seen the same over there. I'm suspecting maybe not, but do you have people that are just really, really good contortionists or as they're learning, because some people just hit a good position, right? And you're like, and they almost learn like, oh, this is easy. Like I make stuff like this, but then as the bar goes higher, they don't really know how to jump. They just know how to lay out.
Yeah. I feel like that would be something might be more common with like younger girls off the top of my head, where like the heights they're jumping at aren't super high, so you can get away with not having a super good vertical and just being a contortionist, as you put it. But
agreed. Yeah,
I guess at the higher level of like male high jumpers, I don't think I've really seen that.
Yeah,
you can't milk that as much.
I've had a couple of clients in the last 2 or 3 years that were just outrageously bendy. What I just say is super flexible. And it can be a struggle because you almost have to go, okay. And when you do drills, I do layout drills with my jumpers, but I'm getting to a point where I'm like, I want to wait and just go, okay, I'm not going to ignore this. And if there's a way to teach you to make a bar in a workout, it depends. Like, I tell the kids sometimes too, I'm like, it's not necessarily about making this bar. I mean, it is, but sometimes in a workout, I'm working on a position more than I am a clearance. You know what I'm saying? I can teach you how to get over the bar, how to rotate better, how to do something with your position, to punch your hips up at a certain time, throw your head back, get your arm connected to your heel, whatever it is. I've done all of them, but it's like, do I really want to do that, like you said, or do I want to teach you how to hit a better lean and how to hit vertical and how to handle higher and higher speeds? Because like you said, the layout will take care of itself when you do those.
I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, like when you were competing collegiately back in the days, like how often would you high jump in practice?
That's a great question. And for the younger listeners out there, I think this is really important. I'm going to even take it back to high school. When I was in high school, we had Thursday dual meets against other teams in our league. And then on the weekends, we would have an invitational that you could go to. It would be some big meet where all the schools could go, but generally only their best. You wouldn't send everybody. And it would depend. Earlier in the season, you might send the whole team. Later in the season, it would be like an invitational, and you would only be the top athletes that would go. But I mean, that means our meet was on Thursday, which means usually Monday or Tuesday, we would probably jump, right? So say I jumped on Saturday, I got Sunday off. I come back Monday, we jump. Tuesday, we might even do a little bit of jumping. Wednesday, we wouldn't jump the day before the meet. Thursday, I would jump. Friday, I wouldn't jump because I had a day to recover before Saturday. But you look at that, I'm like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. That's 4 days. And then my shins were always hamburger by the end of the year. And I would be like, why is that? I was like, well, you're jumping too much. And a couple times my body shut me down and made me take a week off. Our coaches would always give us spring break. take a week off spring break because we
Yeah.
didn't have meets. And that would always feel good for my shins. They would feel fine. I would come back for a couple more weeks. It'd be good. But I mean, I used to take aspirin, to kill pain. My
Yeah.
senior year, I woke up with blood in my mouth a couple of times because I was probably eating a hole in my stomach, taking so much aspirin. And it was just incredible over jumping, right? And then in college, my shins got better, so they didn't hurt that much. And so I was probably able to get away with more overtraining, but it was the same thing. I mean, we were dumb. I look back at it, Fabian, and I'm like, I look at the volume of stuff that we did, from lifting, jumping up and down the stairs at Drake Stadium. I mean, we used to run and try to jump like 7 or 8 steps, 1 and 2 feet, repeat single leg, repeat double legs, up and down those things all the time, box jumps in the gym, and I look at it and I'm like, I seriously think I took about 5 years off my legs at least, because when I got to 28 years old, where now you're finding guys that are 28 are no longer old. Like here in the US, you're getting close to 30 in almost any sport. They start talking about it's time for you to retire, right? But now internationally, it seems like a lot of these guys, I don't even know how old Barshim is, but he's still jumping at a high level. And I think he's got to be over 30 by now. And
he's 32 now. I'm pretty sure he's born 91, and then Donald Thomas is 39, I think.
Right, but back in the day, like when Dwight Stones jumped 7'8", everybody over here was amazed because like he's 30 years old. It's like he's 30. Over here 30 is like this death sentence. But I literally, when I got to 28 in 92, I was 28 years old, and I was getting tired. Like I did not like I said, I lifted probably again too much, but I always felt better when I was stronger. And I didn't have a lot of wisdom as far as the training meso and that kind of cycles and all that. It was still it was newer back then when I was doing it. And, we had our guys writing programs for us at UCLA, but once I left, I didn't have anybody to do that job. So then it had to be me, and I was fortunate enough to be a kinesiology major, but I still made a lot of mistakes. I would be willing to say that I heavily overtrained for years. And it's weird because most people think high jumpers are lazy. Over here, we've got that, everybody's like, oh, you high jumpers, you're just lazy. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, we work pretty hard.
I think most high jumpers would, if they could choose and their bodies could handle it, they would high jump every single day. But they just simply can't do that.
So everything wears out.
Kind of envy some of the other events like discus throwers. They can throw the disc every day. Like that would be pretty sweet if I could do that with a high jump.
Yeah, exactly. It would be nice because there is something about mastery in there, right? And the more you get, the more you do things, you do tend to figure things out. But then again, it's such a powerful sport, and it really requires a lot of elastic elements. And I think it's like anything else. You take a rubber band and you go like this over and over and over. Eventually, it just snaps on you. And you're like, dang it.
Sorry, you just gotta trust that your body will become better with less training. Like it can seem counterintuitive when you're young, but I would say the older you get, and also the better you get, the higher you're jumping, the better you're going to respond to less volume, less jumping. Because when I'm jumping 230, I can like tax my body and get so much more out of a couple of jumps than I could do when I was jumping like 6 feet and I was like 13. So it's just you gotta adapt your training, and the better you get, older you get, the less like full approach jumping you're gonna be able to handle.
I love that question though, Fabian. Thanks for asking it. We've kind of broached that subject here before, but it's interesting to hear it from your side, even the asking of the question, and your insights there are valuable because, like I said, I think a lot of times this is very American now. I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but for instance, say vitamins, right? Someone says, hey, if you take these 3 vitamins, it'll increase this, blah, blah, blah. And someone, here we look at that, we're like, oh yeah, I want that for sure. I want to take, say it's protein or it's glucosamine or vitamin A, let's say, why I should take more of that. Well, Americans will just go, well, I'll buy a whole bottle and start taking half a bottle every day. He's like,
Yeah.
because if a little bit is good, then a lot is better. And we apply that to workouts and to, I mean, part of it's human, not just American, but I think, man, that was the way it was with training and everything else. Like, well, can I lift every day? Won't I get stronger? If I lift every day, it's like, you could, but do you really get the benefit? Does your body wear out? It's like, and now the fortunate thing is we've got a ton of research, right? Now you know that, and you've got, highly trained athletes like yourself saying, hey, you don't have to. And it's probably better if you don't train every day. You can be smarter. You can pick your spots, and you got to mix in more rest. We are kind of learning that here in America with our, these mega sports, football, basketball, over here, the NBA season's 82 games. And then once they get through the regular season, they play playoff series that are best 4 out of 7. And they got to go through 4 of those to win the NBA title. So that's a minimum of 16 more games. That's if you sweep every series. So now you're looking at 98 games. And then some of those guys, I remember Olympic years, Kobe and some of the great American players would then go play the Olympic, thing where they were doing all those games, right? And you're like, when does the season end for those guys? Because then they get like 3 weeks off and then they're starting preseason. You're just like,
it's pretty crazy. Like you don't really have time to build anything during that off season.
Right. And there's no recovery, like you said. And it's really 2 seasons or 3 seasons worth of competing. So you wonder why when Kobe got to be 32 and 33, all of a sudden things started breaking, right? He blew out his Achilles one time, then his shoulder. And you're like, same thing started happening to LeBron. It's like, dude, when stuff starts breaking every season, you're probably getting close to the end. Yeah. Well, hey, Fabian, I have had so much fun. I cannot tell you. I am your biggest fan. I want to come and wherever this goes, maybe I got to figure out a way to get to France and get tickets, but you got to get you there. I don't understand this whole thing about this stupid thing they have. If you're the number 1 jumper, you should be at the Olympics. I want to see you go.
Well, I just gotta jump better. That's what it comes down to. But I believe I can do that. So
and stay healthy. Absolutely.
Yeah, aiming for that. But,
what is your?
It was very nice of you to have me on here.
This is a blast. Just a blast. Real quick, what is your goal other than obviously winning the Olympic gold? But what do you think you can jump this year and what do you have goals overall, say in the next 5 years?
The thing is, right now it's hard for me to think like that when I haven't been jumping well. But I know as soon as I get up over those 230 heights, I'm gonna start thinking like very big again.
Yeah.
And when I'm jumping that high, like then 240 doesn't seem like anything out of reach. Like, yeah.
Yeah, 233. I mean, that's 7.3/4. You go, and 240 is what, like 243 is 711. So 240 is like 710. Yeah.
No, I've definitely had moments in my career where I've been in better shape than 233. But other things are coming the way. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'll just gotta stay healthy. Easier said than done, but it's possible.
Staying healthy, you can do it. Yeah, and if you would please send those videos. I'd love to do another post series and show the changes that you went through from even 14 on up through. Not only seeing how tall you were at 14, but watching the change from the single arm to the double. That'd be fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I got a video of me being 6'6" at 14, jumping.
Wow.
Speed jumping. So that will be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on.
And, hey, thank you, Fabian. This is great, man. I really appreciate your time and your experience and your expertise and sharing with all our listeners. It's awesome of you to take the time.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. And that's going to wrap it up for us here on Raise the Bar, the first episode on Saturday, August 26th. We were just talking with Fabian Delryd from Sweden, the number 1 ranked Swedish high jumper since 2017, we found out. And he is getting ready to start his, he's going to finish up his outdoor season with a meet this next week. Then he's going to take a couple weeks off and he's going to get ready for indoor. and that will lead into the outdoor season where he hopefully qualifies for the Olympics. He's a fun kid to talk to. Learned a lot from him. He jumped 7 3/4 and started out as a single armor. Now he's a double armor. Lots of great info from Fabian. So we're looking forward to seeing him compete. And then later on today, we will be having a second podcast where I'll be interviewing Mr. John Butler, who is the entrepreneur behind J7 Performance. He's a sprint specialist and a sports development coach. And we're going to have him here at 3:00. So I get about a half an hour to get ready. Until then, until next time, this is Troy Haynes from Sky High and Fly Jump Camps signing off with another episode of Raise the Bar in the Bag. Until next time.